New York in late autumn often feels colder than other places, not because of the wind, but because of the way people pass each other by, as if no one exists except themselves. On 14th Avenue, a stream of people rushed past a towering glass building with a lit-up sign. Future Sphere, a tech store chain rapidly expanding across the East Coast, praised as where technology meets modern service excellence. The glass doors opened and closed continuously like a machine. Inside was a brightly lit space, filled with the smooth sound of advertisements playing from LED screens, and young employees dressed like startup founders, constantly scanning the crowd to decide which customers looked worth serving. Amidst the crowd walking through the entrance, a small frame figure appeared. He wore a charcoal gray baseball cap, a worn-out wool coat with frayed shoulders, old khaki pants, and black shoes dulled by time. In his hand was a folded piece of paper, and his squinting eyes struggled to read the scrawled blue ink letters. He entered the gleaming space with visible unease. His eyes scanned hundreds of products on display, like in a futuristic lab. He stopped in front of a table showcasing several new model laptops. After a moment's hesitation, he looked up at the nearest employee. A young man in a navy blue polo shirt named Jordan was leaning against the counter, phone in hand, wearing AirPods. He glanced at the old man like someone annoyed to be interrupted during his live stream shift. The old man smiled faintly, folded the paper back up, and said slowly, carefully, pronouncing each word with broken English, "You have laptop like grandson has for school?" Jordan removed one earbud, raised his eyebrows, then turned to his two co-workers, Malik and Darren. All three burst out laughing, not loudly, but enough for the man standing before them to feel small. Malik mimicked an Asian accent. "Ah, you mean laptop for Kung Fu Panda?" The trio laughed again like they just invented the joke of the century. The old man didn't react. He simply stood there, hands clasped in front of him, his gaze still gentle. Jordan nodded as if obligated to end the interaction quickly, pointed to an older model laptop with a slightly scratched case, and said, "This one, sir." "Very good. Easy to use. For simple people." His last sentence dropped in volume but carried a clear insult. He looked back at his friends as if expecting applause. The old man stared at the laptop for a long moment, then looked back up. "It has, how to say, good photo storage? For family?" Jordan nodded quickly. "Oh yes, for big family. Many photos. Even your ancestors." Malik snorted, and Darren tapped the table. "Grandpa's got jokes too." In the far corner of the store, a young woman wearing the same uniform, her name tag read Maya, intern, was adjusting a demo screen. She didn't laugh. She didn't take her eyes off the old man. But when his eyes happened to meet hers, Maya immediately looked down as if caught. She felt something was wrong, very wrong, but lacked the courage to speak. She was just an intern, her first day on the job, and didn't want to draw attention. The old man gently touched the laptop, then handed over a worn-out bill. Jordan took it, printed the receipt, and shoved the laptop box into his hands. "Enjoy, sir. Don't let it cook your rice." Another round of laughter erupted. The old man bowed his head in thanks, nodding slowly, then walked calmly toward the door. In that moment, among the rows of 4K screens playing ads, with upbeat EDM blasting from new Bluetooth speakers, a quiet image stood out from the glitzy tech world. A frail old man clutching a used laptop box, walking through blue-white light as if he had wandered into a place he didn't belong. Jordan turned to the group. "I swear New York needs pronunciation classes. Who can understand guys like that?" Malik chimed in. "He probably thinks this is some Japanese corner store." Another burst of laughter. Maya quietly retreated to the back, gripping the screen controller tightly. She had never felt so cold inside such a brightly lit space. Just minutes later, the old man had disappeared into the crowd outside, as if he had never existed. But what happened after that day, none of them could have imagined. Mr. Yuto didn't leave the neighborhood right away. He crossed the street and stopped at a small cafe named Isabella's, the kind of place with just 2 wooden tables by the window and a free bookshelf outside. He sat down, still holding the laptop box Jordan had handed him. Steam from his hot tea fogged up his old glasses. He pulled out a cloth from his pocket, wiped them gently, and placed his note on the table. On it were a few trembling lines of English handwritten in blue ink. Laptop for student. Photo storage. Not too heavy. Fast internet. Below each line was a smaller line in Japanese, apparently his own translation. His eyes looked out toward the street, where Future Sphere's glass front continued to showcase young models holding tech products with perfect smiles. He said nothing, but his heart was not as calm as his expression. What hurt him wasn't the jokes, nor the outdated laptop. It was that he had once believed, after all these years, that New York might be a place where he could restart something he had once lost. In his youth, Mr. Yuto had come to America with dreams of studying software engineering in Washington State. But because his English wasn't good, he was rejected 3 times for scholarships. A professor once told him bluntly, "You're smart, but your English makes you sound dumb." That sentence stayed with him for 40 years. He didn't seek revenge. He just studied quietly, then returned to Japan. With his friend Takashi Midori, he co-founded Midori Tech, the company behind several anonymous data systems for U.S. corporations. But he always stayed in the background, never spoke on stage, never represented the company publicly, because he still believed his voice wasn't good enough to represent intelligence. He returned to America this time not to invest, not to supervise, but simply to buy a laptop for his grandson, a boy who had lost his mother at a young age and was raised by him. The boy was about to start college, and Yuto wanted to buy the exact model the boy had chosen so they could learn to connect through technology. But now what he brought back was an outdated device and a feeling of being stuck. Back inside Future Sphere, Jordan was still watching the video he had secretly recorded on his phone, the clip of the old man pronouncing laptop for grandson, before sending it to the store's internal group chat with the caption, "Ladies and gentlemen, AI voice beta, version 1922. The group roared. Malik replied, "Bro, this man came straight out of a fax machine." Darren followed with a meme of the old man wearing a cartoon helmet. They didn't know that the clip would later be played at a press conference by the CEO, and that it would go viral across the nation as a symbol of mocking the elderly for their accents. Maya sat in the break room, her phone on the table, but screen off. She had seen the group chat notification, but didn't laugh. She thought of the wrinkled hands holding that folded paper, of the way the old man bowed in thanks despite being belittled. She wanted to say something to the manager, to send an anonymous email to HR, to do something to protest. But she was just an intern, no contract, no insurance, and her immigrant parents, from Honduras, were still in debt from her father's heart surgery. One wrong word, one misstep, and she'd lose everything. Maya sighed and turned off her phone, but in her heart, that old man's image hadn't left. Outside, it had started to drizzle. Mr. Yuto still sat there, unhurried. He opened the new laptop, plugged it in at the cafe, and powered it up. The screen flickered. The software lagged. The trackpad didn't respond. He quietly closed the lid. No blame. No complaints. He simply pulled out a small notebook and wrote a few lines on the last page. And at the bottom of that page, he wrote a single name, Maya, because he had seen those eyes and had sensed the silent resistance in that gaze. He didn't know that from that moment on, the entire Future Sphere system, with over 80 locations across America, had begun counting down to a permanent transformation. All from a question that seemed so foolish. "You have laptop, like grandson has?" 3 days later, Future Sphere, Manhattan branch, was still operating as usual, at least on the surface. The ceiling lights continued to emit showroom-level white light. The background music still played the latest remix by The Weeknd through the smart speaker system, and the employees still wore navy polo shirts pinned with "Tech with Heart" badges on their left chest, as if they truly believed in it. Jordan, as always, showed up 15 minutes late, carrying an overpriced protein coffee smoothie, adjusting his hairstyle as he walked, like he was heading to a photo shoot rather than a sales shift. "Hey, Malik," he said as he walked in. "Did that old guy ever come back?" Malik laughed. "Nah, probably trying to install Google using foot pedals." They both burst into laughter. Maya heard them from the left counter but pretended not to notice. She was trying to log into the product management system. The computer was loading slowly, for the third time that morning. When she opened the specs panel, a report appeared. The laptop sold to the old man, serial ending in 5G73, was listed as a refurbished unit with a faulty trackpad sensor and should have been kept in the tech storage area awaiting inspection. The one who authorized it for sale? None other than Jordan. Maya stared at that line. Her heartbeat skipped a beat. She knew that according to protocol, if a staff member sold a defective item, the system would issue an automatic alert. But if it was approved by a supervisor, the alert could be bypassed or erased within the same system. Maya looked over at Jordan. He was showing off his new sneakers to Darren, completely unaware that the seemingly trivial action from that day had become the first domino in a chain collapse. Just then, an elderly woman walked in. Her hair was snow white, she wore a cardigan and carried an embroidered fabric tote. She stopped at the tablet table, picked up an iPad mini, and turned to Jordan. "Excuse me, does this one support video calls with my grandson?" Jordan didn't even look at her before replying in an impatient tone. "Depends. Does your grandson have ears?" Malik howled with laughter. The elderly woman didn't understand. "I mean FaceTime. Can I talk to him on the screen?" Jordan gave a dismissive nod and turned away. She tried to ask another question, but he raised a hand signaling, "Wait," then went back to scrolling his phone. Maya saw the whole thing and felt her blood rush to her face. This time she stepped in. "I can help you, ma'am," Maya said, then gently walked her through the specs line by line. The woman smiled, her hands trembling from unfamiliarity with the device. Maya placed her finger on the home button and said, "Here, just press here, and you'll be able to call him every night." The woman's voice softened. "Thank you, dear. You're the first girl who didn't make me feel stupid all week." After the woman left, Jordan walked over, arms crossed. "Maya, who told you to step into my section?" Maya faced him, trying to stay calm. She wasn't being helped. Jordan smirked coldly. "If we help every customer like that, why do we need staff? Might as well bring in robots." Malik added, "She likes being the hero, doesn't she?" Darren chimed in, "Don't blame her. Grandpa gave her a sweet little look the other day." Maya clenched her fists. She knew they were pushing her toward the edge. That evening, she opened her personal laptop and typed in a search. Future Sphere Harassment Reporting Protocol. The page loaded, internal feedback, for official employees with ID numbers only. She sighed. She was just an intern, a nameless, numberless, unprotected person. She thought about printing a resignation letter, but then she remembered the old man's eyes, the eyes that thanked her despite receiving nothing. She closed her laptop. No resignation, no retaliation. But she couldn't stay silent forever either. Across the city, Mr. Yuto sat inside a small apartment in Brooklyn that he had temporarily rented for 6 weeks. The room had cream-colored walls, a wooden desk, and a few printed paintings of places he had once visited. The laptop he bought sat on the table. It froze when opened, and key presses showed up 2 seconds later. He had tried calling Future Sphere's customer support center. After 40 minutes on hold, they told him, "Your product is not eligible for exchange because it's a refurbished item." He wasn't angry, but he recorded the call. Then he picked up his phone and dialed an international number. On the other end was Hiro Tanaka, his right-hand man at Midori Ventures. "Hiro-san," he said, his voice steady, "I need you to do something for me. Pull the full system of the Future Sphere chain, all leadership, complaint history, especially the Manhattan branch." Hiro didn't ask why. He simply replied, "Yes, sir." Within 48 hours. 2 days later, a 62-page report was delivered to Yuto's private inbox. It contained numerous notes, over 200 complaints about staff behavior within the past year, multiple accusations of racial discrimination, ageism, and inappropriate mockery. But what caught his attention wasn't the numbers. It was a video segment from the store's security camera. The footage clearly captured him walking in, pronouncing words awkwardly, asking about a laptop. The group of employees behind the counter laughed scornfully. Another camera angle showed Maya, the only one who didn't laugh. She turned away, bit her lip, then lowered her eyes to the floor. Mr. Yuto paused the video, rewound, paused again, rewound a third time. He opened his notebook and wrote a single line. She didn't laugh. Then he called Hiro. "Begin." Phase 1. On Monday of the following week, the atmosphere inside the Future Sphere store began to shift into something difficult to define. Not the usual busyness, but a quiet kind of disturbance, like water that seems calm on the surface, but swirls furiously underneath. Jordan received an email from the regional supervisor stating, "Within the next 5 days, an inspection team from Midori will visit to audit store operations." Malik read it aloud to the entire team and burst out laughing. "Oh, great! Another bunch of Asian nerds in suits coming to ask if we're drinking enough water." Darren added, "Feels like Elon Musk is about to walk in." They laughed, not knowing that the very man they once mocked was already sitting silently behind the curtain. Meanwhile, Maya continued her quiet work, without telling anyone that she had been documenting a growing list of customer mistreatment incidents over the past 2 weeks. She had begun keeping receipts, taking screenshots of internal chat messages, and saving store camera footage, including one clip where Jordan yelled at a young Indian boy for tapping the tablet like he's hacking NASA. Maya knew that if she submitted this data, she might be called into the manager's office for violating internal policy. But she also knew, if she did nothing, it would keep happening, not just to her, but to hundreds of others. The next day around noon, an older man walked into the store. He wore a military jacket, a small backpack over one shoulder, and walked with a slight limp. His left leg was a prosthetic. He approached the mobile phone counter and asked a staff member, "Can I pay for this in installments?" The employee, his name was Rick, looked him up and down and replied, "We do offer that service, but you need a good credit score. This isn't some welfare center." The words struck like a stone to the face. The veteran simply nodded. "I served in Iraq. I don't have good credit, but I have enough honor not to beg for a discount." Rick didn't respond, just curled his lip. The veteran walked out without buying anything. Maya stood a few feet away. She had heard everything. The next morning, a black elderly woman in a floral dress showed up at the tablet counter. She asked Maya softly, "I want to buy one to video call my grandson, but I don't know how to ask." Maya smiled. "I'll help you." But before she could approach, Jordan stepped in. "Sorry, she's not on this section. Come with me, ma'am." He led the woman to a display of clearance models, used and discounted, and pointed to an old tablet, saying it was suitable for older folks not too smart. When the woman asked about warranty, Jordan said, "Use it as long as it works. Don't expect miracles." Maya stepped in. "You can't sell that device to her. It's in the maintenance category." Jordan turned to her and lowered his voice so only the two of them could hear. "Trying to play angel again? Remember, you haven't signed a real contract." Maya didn't reply. She just pulled the woman back to the main table and processed the purchase for the newest model, with full warranty. That evening, Maya stayed later than usual. As she shut down her computer, she saw someone standing in the doorway, neither stepping in nor walking away. It was the old man from before. He was still wearing the same gray sweater, still holding the old laptop Jordan had sold him. Maya walked over and spoke softly. "Do you need help, sir?" He nodded. "Machine, not working, screen, freeze." His voice was the same, slow, slightly off rhythm, with the tone of someone who had learned English alone. Maya opened the laptop to check. Just as she suspected, the trackpad was unresponsive, the software lagged heavily, and the battery was defective. She knew this device came from the tech batch that should never have been sold. The man sat quietly, hands folded, staring at the screen as if waiting for something more than just technology. Maya exhaled. "I'm sorry, this laptop wasn't worth your money." He shook his head. "Not fault of machine, fault in giving." Maya understood. She said, "I'll report this to the company." He looked at her for a long time, then slowly nodded. Before leaving, he left a small note, the handwriting still shaky. "Thank you for speaking to me like I matter." 2 days later, Mr. Yudo returned to the store. This time he wasn't wearing a sweater. He wore a suit, nothing flashy, but polished enough that Malik glanced at him, then looked away. He walked slowly through each aisle, jotting notes in a small notebook, occasionally stopping to ask short questions. A young Chinese-American customer was frowned at by a staff member when he asked, "Why is this tablet more expensive here than online?" The staff member muttered under his breath, "Ask China. They make everything cheap." Mr. Yuto was just a few steps away. He heard it all. He didn't react, just wrote a line in his notebook, and left the store just as the sun was beginning to set. At that very moment, in Midori's Tokyo office, Hiro Tanaka received a signal from his boss. Phase 2. Begin acquisition. A legal and financial team was immediately mobilized. They didn't act under the Midori brand, but through an independent investment fund, Celestial Holdings, which quietly purchased 11% of FutureSphere's shares within 48 hours. That was only the beginning. In Manhattan, no one knew that the man they once nicknamed Mr. Fax Machine had already started transforming the entire ecosystem they depended on. He didn't need revenge. He just documented, one by one, every wrong action. Because he knew, to fix a system, you don't have to shout. You just have to listen long enough to know exactly where to touch. On Thursday morning, Maya arrived at the store earlier than usual. She hadn't told anyone, but she hadn't slept at all the night before. After everything she had witnessed, the old man with the defective laptop, the elderly woman pushed toward the bargain section, the veteran dismissed over credit score, Maya began to feel something stirring inside her. It was no longer confusion. It was anger, but not the explosive kind. It was the quiet kind, steadfast, like a small flame at the bottom of a pot, unseen but capable of boiling everything over if left unattended. She unlocked the storage room and rechecked the inventory of items marked as refurbished. Devices previously flagged as defective but quietly pushed onto the main floor by Jordan. In the system, multiple entries had been manually altered, from not sellable to display only, and eventually deleted entirely from status history. Maya photographed every line, saving them to a private USB drive. She knew she was walking a tightrope, but she also knew doing nothing would make her complicit. Around 9 a.m., just after the doors opened, a delivery worker walked in. He handed her a yellow envelope, no return address, just the words, "To Maya, from the customer on Monday." Maya's hands froze for a few seconds. She opened the envelope. Inside was a folded A4 sheet, handwritten in blue ink. The first line read, "You were the first person to look at me like a human being, not a language error." Maya sat down. Her heart raced. The next line, "I was once denied a scholarship because of my voice, but you made me feel like I was speaking correctly." Then came a longer passage. He explained that the laptop he bought didn't work, but it wasn't as bad as how it was given to me. The final sentence was a line in Japanese. Maya couldn't read it, and beneath it, a translation in English. "I hope one day, someone like you will stand center stage, and no one will tell you to be quiet." No signature, but Maya knew exactly who it was. She folded the letter and slipped it into her uniform chest pocket. That entire morning, though no one noticed, Maya carried herself differently. She didn't lower her head when called. She didn't avoid Jordan's gaze. When customers asked questions, she answered directly with confidence. When a young father requested an exchange for his daughter's laggy device, she didn't redirect him to another department. She handled it herself. And for the first time in weeks, she felt she didn't need permission to do what was right. Around midday, Jordan noticed Maya taking more initiative. Her demeanor visibly changed. He approached with a warning tone. "You don't have to prove anything. You're just an intern." Maya turned and looked him in the eye. "I'm not proving anything. I'm fixing what you left behind." Jordan was speechless. He had never seen Maya talk back. Before he could reply, an internal email was sent to all staff. "Regional director will visit the branch next week. Prepare detailed reports of customer complaints and service conduct from the past 3 months." The team fell silent. Malik muttered, "Something's going on." That afternoon, Maya entered the archive room and opened the old physical file box, the one storing paper reports from before the system went fully digital. Inside an old binder, she found a stack of handwritten customer feedback forms, filled out in pen, with signatures. Among them was a cream-colored page, not a standard form, written in a familiar handwriting. "Denied service because I mispronounced the word processor." Below it read, "Not trying to complain, just trying to understand." The final signature, Yuto, customer. Maya stared at the name. For the first time, she knew the old man's full name. That evening, Maya went home, opened Google, and typed, Yuto Handwriting Tech Japan. Dozens of results appeared. She clicked on one article. Yuto Sakamoto, software engineer and former architect of Midori AI language systems. She scrolled quickly. The attached photo showed a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and glasses, speaking at a conference in Osaka. Gentle expression, faint smile. The caption below the article read, "The man behind Midori's encryption system, who never gives interviews because he dislikes his own voice." Maya sat upright. She placed the customer feedback note beside the letter she received. The handwriting was identical, down to every curve. That was when Maya understood. The old man wasn't just a customer, not just a victim. He was someone who could change everything, and was doing so quietly. The next morning when Maya arrived at the store, the letter was no longer in her chest pocket. Someone had seen it. She didn't know who. But by midday, Jordan walked up and shot her a cold glare. "You think that old man's some kind of superhero?" Maya didn't respond. But in her eyes, there was no longer any fear. In his Brooklyn apartment, Mr. Yuto received a message from Hiro. Acquired an additional 6% of shares, now holding a total of 17%. The chairman is requesting an urgent dialogue. He replied briefly, "No dialogue needed. Proceed to phase 3. Audit personnel data chain-wide." Hiro responded, "Surprise inspection orders confirmed for 3 stores. Manhattan is first." Mr. Yuto put down the phone. He looked out the window. New York skies had turned gray, hinting at rain. But the storm approaching wasn't weather. It was change. The next day, before the sun had even risen above Manhattan's rooftops, employees at the FutureSphere branch on 14th Avenue received an urgent email. The subject line was a single sentence. "Visit from Midori, 11 a.m. today. All staff required." Below the bold text was a message from the regional manager. "Representatives from Midori Ventures will conduct an in-person inspection of service quality. Please ensure the store meets the highest standards. This is not a casual visit." Jordan read the message as he set his iced coffee down on the counter. He rolled his eyes. "Looks like the Midori folks are coming to bless us?" Malik sighed. "Hope it's not another bunch of gray silk tie nerds like last time," Darren joked. "As long as they don't ask if the customers are smiling enough." They laughed. But unlike usual, the laughter was short and unsure. This time something felt real. Close. Cold. Maya stood quietly in the device storage room, staring at the system message displayed on the monitor. "All employee interactions will be evaluated today." Since receiving the handwritten letter, her mindset had shifted. No longer was she the timid intern afraid of losing her place. Now she was someone who knew she was watching and being watched. But this time, not just by the cameras, by someone higher, deeper, and more real. At exactly 10:27 a.m., a black SUV pulled up in front of the store. A middle-aged woman stepped out first, wearing a sleek black suit and a small Midori emblem pinned to her lapel. Behind her were 2 men, one with silver hair, the other dark-skinned, both in dark suits. No one spoke. No one carried laptops or clipboards like the usual inspection teams. They entered the store like they already knew everything. Jordan tightened his belt, smoothed his hair, trying to appear casual. As the trio walked in, Malik was the first to greet them. He forced a smile. "Welcome to FutureSphere. How can I help you today?" The woman didn't shake hands. She simply said, "We'll be observing. Please proceed as usual." No one gave a name. No one stated a title. Jordan stepped forward, trying to insert himself. "If you need anything, I'm the lead manager here." The silver-haired man glanced at his name tag, nodded slightly, said nothing. That silence made Jordan freeze. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the store felt compressed. Even the customers who walked in sensed something strange, serious. Maya noticed the inspectors spread out across the floor. No notes, no questions, just observing. An Asian female customer asked about the return policy. Malik fumbled because he forgot the policy code, and Jordan jumped in with an overly confident response that only confused her more. The woman from Midori tilted her head slightly, typed something into her phone. Maya helped an older man who had lost his phone due to a software glitch. She manually restored his data. A moment later, she sensed someone behind her. She turned. It was the dark-skinned man from the Midori group. He said nothing. He simply watched the screen as she worked, eyes full of evaluation, but not harshness. He nodded. Maya gave a slight bow. Inside her, something stirred, something like hope. At 11:42 a.m., a group of school children walked in, 3 black kids in public school uniforms. One of them exclaimed, "Wow, this place is like a spaceship." The second asked Malik, "Sir, can these glasses play games?" Malik scoffed without bending down. "I'm not your gaming assistant, kid." One of the 3 inspectors, the woman this time, stood nearby. She looked at Jordan. Jordan stammered, They're not potential customers." She nodded and typed more. Just before noon, the Midori group left abruptly. No goodbyes, no sign-in, no business cards left behind. They disappeared the same way they arrived. Jordan watched them go, exhaled. "That's it. We're done." But Maya didn't think so. She knew, when people with real power go quiet, it's not the end. It's the beginning. That afternoon, all staff received a message. Please update personnel files, customer service records, and video interactions from this week. Coordination Board will meet Monday for preliminary evaluations. Jordan frowned. They're not just observing, they're auditing the whole system. Malik whispered, "That old guy, do you think he was someone important?" Jordan snapped, "I don't care, as long as they don't find my clip." Maya turned away, revealing nothing on her face. That evening at the Future Sphere headquarters in New Jersey, an emergency meeting was held between board members and representatives from Celestial Holdings. On the attendee list, one small name that no one paid attention to: Yuto Sakamoto, Senior Advisor, Midori Ventures. The meeting lasted 38 minutes, no recordings. But afterward, Future Sphere's automated system issued temporary access suspensions for 23 branch management accounts, including Jordan's. Back in the Brooklyn apartment, Mr. Yuto replayed the store camera footage. The moment Maya leaned down to help the customer, he typed into his digital journal, "She doesn't need to prove anything, because her actions speak for her." Then he looked up at the whiteboard hanging above his desk. At the center of the organizational diagram was not the CEO, but a single word: respect. On Monday, the air inside the Future Sphere store on 14th Avenue felt as heavy as the thin layer of dust settling across the glass counters that hadn't yet been wiped. Everyone arrived early, too early. Ties were tightened, uniforms pressed, and Jordan even wore cologne, something unprecedented in his entire work history at the store. Maya walked in exactly at 8 a.m., the small USB containing all her evidence still in her pocket. But today, she wasn't in gathering mode. She walked in with the sense of someone about to witness something being turned inside out. At 9:30 a.m., a small truck bearing the Celestial Logistics logo parked in front of the store. A young man stepped out, carrying 2 boxes containing surveillance equipment. He said nothing, introduced no one. He set up the equipment at the camera station and nodded at the tech staff. The entire camera system had its firmware updated that same morning. Malik looked at Jordan. "I feel like we're in a game show and no one gave us the rules." Jordan tightened his grip on his coffee cup, his usual smirk nowhere to be seen. At exactly 11:02, the door opened again. A group of unfamiliar guests walked in. They weren't dressed extravagantly, just simple, neat, without logos or identifying marks. But something about them made it impossible to ignore their presence. Leading the group was a tall black man in a blazer and dark khakis. Behind him, a South Asian man in a mandarin collar shirt, and at the rear, walking quietly, was Mr. Yuto. No one recognized him. No one suspected that among the suits, ties, and polished words, the elderly man in a dark fabric coat, with calm eyes and a slightly bent back, was the one holding the key to the entire chain's fate. He walked slowly past every display. No one asked what he needed. No one dared stop him. He lingered at the tablet counter, the one where Malik had once conned an elderly black woman into buying a clearance model. He paused in front of the laptop section, where Jordan had once handed him a defective device. The eyes behind his glasses remained the same, gentle, quiet, but within them were layered memories that had not faded. In the back break room, Maya was watching through the camera feed. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized him, not because of his clothes, but because of his gaze. the gaze of someone who had once handed her a handwritten letter, someone who had thanked her just for treating him like a human being. She stepped out of the room but didn't approach. She simply stood at the end of the aisle to quietly confirm he was here. He was still watching. Jordan stepped toward the tall black man leading the group and gave a small nod. "Hello, I'm the manager here. If you need anything, I'm happy to assist." The man nodded. "We're just observing." Jordan forced a smile. "Of course, but just to clarify, are you here from internal investment or from service audit?" The man didn't answer. He tilted his head toward Mr. Yuto. Jordan followed the gesture and frowned. For a few seconds, his eyes landed on the old man. Something flickered, a vague recognition, like a memory without a name. But then he turned back, smirking faintly. "If you need water, the break room's in the back." Mr. Yuto said nothing, didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He simply kept walking, as if he wasn't walking through a store at all, but through the fragments of his own past. The place where he'd once been dismissed for mispronouncing processor as processor. The place where he'd been handed a broken machine and a mocking smile. The place where he had once believed he no longer belonged in the modern world. And the place he was now preparing to change. At the checkout counter, a customer informed Darren that the receipt printer wasn't working. Darren snapped, "If the machine's broken, stop jamming buttons." Maya was nearby. She stepped in, gently saying, "I'm sorry, sir. Let me assist." She checked the system, found a bent cable, and fixed the issue in 30 seconds. When she turned around, she saw Mr. Yuto watching her, quietly, gently, as if thanking her without saying a word. As the customer walked away, Mr. Yuto slowly approached Maya. No one noticed. Everyone else was watching the other suited men. He spoke softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I received the recording." Maya looked confused. "Recording?" He nodded. "You recorded my voice when I asked about the laptop, the very first time." Maya began to speak, but he raised a hand. "Don't apologize. Thanks to it, I heard myself again, and realized I'm no longer afraid of that voice." She was speechless, but he only bowed his head and walked away. Immediately after, the tall black man pulled out his phone and sent a command. Within 5 minutes, the entire internal Wi-Fi network at the branch was temporarily shut down. An urgent email was dispatched to the national CEO, requesting high-level internal audit, Manhattan branch, all surveillance footage, customer feedback, and staff allocation by month must be provided. Jordan stumbled when he got the notification. Malik snapped, "What the hell is going on?" Darren panicked. "Why are they going this hard over a few people?" But Maya knew this wasn't about a few people. It was about every single person who had been treated as less than human. And today they were walking in, not demanding justice with shouts, but with their presence. That night, Maya received an anonymous email to her personal account. "Keep a copy of the letter he gave you. One day it will be proof of a new era." No signature, no reply address. But she didn't need to guess, because in a world where power often hides its face, she had just seen a man who no longer did. He simply walked in. On Tuesday afternoon, an emergency meeting was convened in the auditorium on the 6th floor of FutureSphere's headquarters in New Jersey. Normally used for product launches or quarterly shareholder briefings, this time the glass walls were fully covered with frosted film, and security guards collected all phones before anyone could enter. The strangeness of the event was evident. Even the hum of the AC seemed dialed down to the sound of faint wind. The guest list wasn't publicized. Only about 40 people were in attendance. Senior executives, regional managers, representatives from major branches, and, most notably, the staff from the Manhattan location, including Jordan, Malik, and Darren. They were instructed to be there by exactly 3 p.m., not a minute late. Maya was also on the list, labeled as a special observer. Jordan showed up in a gray suit, his hair slicked back, flanked by Malik and Darren. The three whispered among themselves in the hallway, trying to guess what this investor meeting was really about. "They're probably unveiling a new AI tech," Darren said, "or launching a big marketing push." Malik nodded, but Jordan had a different feeling. Ever since the Midori team's visit 3 days earlier, his internal management account had been partially restricted. Emails to the quality assurance department went unanswered. Most importantly, The video clip of the old man from earlier, the one he once thought was just a joke, had vanished from the system, leaving no trace. The room slowly filled. Maya sat in the last row, holding a printed copy of Mr. Udo's handwritten letter, now scanned and duplicated. She didn't know why she had been invited, but with a deep, certain intuition, she knew. Today, silence would end. At exactly 3:01 p.m., the rear doors of the auditorium opened. A middle-aged man entered. He wore a black suit, not flashy, with a soft-collared white shirt and no tie. He wasn't tall, his back slightly hunched, hair salt and pepper. In his hand was a small bundle of documents tied with a thin blue cord. No one recognized him at first, because no one, in their world, believed a man like that could walk into the heart of power. He stopped at the center of the auditorium. The event coordinator spoke. "Please welcome Mr. Yudo Sakamoto, Senior Advisor at Midori Ventures and current legal representative of Celestial Holdings, the new strategic shareholder of FutureSphere, holding 27.4% of the company-wide shares." A wave of silence swept the room like an electric jolt. Jordan shot to his feet, his face drained of color. Malik blurted out, "Wait, that's the old guy?" Darren nearly lost balance in his seat, looking around as if waiting for a prank camera crew to jump out. Mr. Udo did not smile. He opened the document bundle, placed it on the podium, and looked forward. "I'm not here to talk about technology, not about AI or equity or profit." His voice wasn't loud, wasn't deep, didn't carry the tone of a CEO, but each word landed squarely in the empty space inside everyone listening. 3 weeks ago, I walked into store branch 14. I asked a very simple question. "Do you have a computer like my grandson's?" He paused. There was no need to play a video, no need to reenact the moment, because all three, Jordan, Malik, Darren, had already replayed that scene hundreds of times in their own minds. I was handed a defective laptop, but I wasn't hurt by the machine. I was hurt by how it was handed to me. He looked up, his gaze sharpening in calm intensity. I heard laughter. I saw ridicule. And I wondered, how many people have walked into our stores and walked out feeling like they weren't smart enough to buy a computer? Every gaze dropped to the floor. No one dared breathe loudly. I wasn't looking for a laptop. I was looking for dignity. The sentence fell like a blade honed to precision. I don't need employees with the best degrees. I need human beings who know how to respect others, no matter how they speak English, how they dress, or how much gray is in their hair. Maya sat quietly in the back. She wanted to stand, to say something, but then Mr. Yuto turned toward her. There was one person who didn't laugh, who didn't bow her head, who didn't say much, but her eyes, they made me believe we still have hope. All eyes turned to Maya. She stood, for the first time, without lowering her head, and she realized today she no longer had to hide. Mr. Yudo continued, I have proposed, and the board has approved, the suspension of all personnel connected to the recent negative incidents over the past 3 months, so we can rebuild the system from within. No immediate terminations, but a full audit begins now. Jordan's shoulders dropped. Malik leaned back in his chair. Darren placed a hand on his head. Additionally, I am appointing Maya Torres, an unpaid intern, as acting director of customer experience for the entire region. Maya froze. She wanted to ask why, but the answer was already in his eyes. Mr. Yudo stepped down from the podium, but before he left, he spoke one final sentence. A company doesn't collapse because its technology is outdated. It collapses because the character of the people representing it is. After the meeting that afternoon, no one left the auditorium right away. Everyone simply sat there, not out of fear, but because no one knew where to begin again. Those who had once been the most confident now stared at the floor. Those who used to mock and overpower others seemed to have been stripped of speech. Only Maya, standing alone in the back row, felt lighter. Not because of the title, but because for the first time in her life she had been heard, without needing to raise her voice. Jordan sat frozen for a long time. He looked down at his hands as if trying to find proof this was just a bad dream. Malik stared at the placard with the Midori logo at the front of the room. Darren pressed his fingernail so hard into his palm that it turned red. When Mr. Udo's footsteps finally faded, no one stood. The atmosphere held no tears, no screaming, but it weighed heavier than any reprimand they'd ever received. Because this time, the silence itself was the harshest sentence. That evening at the Manhattan branch, a suspension order came via email. Access accounts of the individuals involved will be temporarily disabled. You are not to interact with customers until further notice. HR will contact each person individually for interviews. Jordan read the line and felt like his heart dropped into a pit. He tried logging into the management system. The screen displayed, "Access denied." Malik messaged their group chat, "It's real. Everything's locked." Darren was asked to hand over his ID badge immediately. Jordan replied, "Are they trying to wipe us out?" No one responded. The group chat went silent. The same kind of silence they once used to ridicule others had now come back, to enclose them. Maya received a different email. Subject line, "Temporary appointment, internal customer data access protocol." She opened the attachment. It wasn't long, just a system map for customer feedback, a few sample reports, and a scanned handwritten note from Mr. Udo. "Don't try to change everything. Just preserve what makes you different from them." The next morning when she arrived at the store, everything was still lit up like usual, but no one was talking loudly. No more jokes in the break room. Malik sat alone in the corner, skipping breakfast. Darren didn't show up. Jordan arrived nearly an hour late, not in uniform, just to sign his suspension confirmation form. The store, once a loudspeaker of ego, had become a soundproof room, where people sat close but didn't dare meet each other's eyes. Maya entered a small back office where she had been given her own desk for the first time in her life. No nameplate, no glass door. Just a simple wooden desk, a laptop, and a whiteboard. On the board, someone had written in messy marker, "Customer first," but the handwriting was careless, like it was written just to fill space. Maya erased it, picked up another marker, and rewrote it. "Dignity first." That afternoon, a black woman walked in, holding the hand of a little girl around 7 years old. The girl pointed at a smartwatch behind the glass. "Mom, can I try that?" The mother asked gently, "Does she have to buy it just to try it on?" Malik was nearby. He said nothing, didn't step forward. Maya stood up, walked out. "She can try it. If she likes it, we have a student support program." The woman nodded, her eyes lighting up with gratitude. No discount needed, just the sense that they were allowed to exist, without judgment. Later that same day at headquarters, Mr. Udo stepped into the tech operations room. On the wall was a large screen showing metrics: average service time per branch, positive feedback rates, returning customer counts over the past 90 days. He stood in front of a red-colored graph, Manhattan's branch. The chart had begun to shift color from red to orange. Slowly, but it was moving. He told the tech team, "No need to increase pressure, just let them feel that something right is starting." One team member asked, "What about those suspended?" He replied, "If they're only afraid of losing their jobs, then they've learned nothing. But if they feel ashamed, then that's the beginning of learning again." That evening, Jordan walked into a small bar, the same place where he used to meet coworkers and joke about customers. This time, no one showed up. He sat alone, glass in hand, but didn't drink. Suddenly, someone sat next to him. It was Darren. No eye contact, no handshake. Just a sentence. "That old man didn't raise his voice once, but I've been hearing him in my head for 2 straight days." Jordan didn't answer. They both looked at the TV screen above the bar. It was playing a commercial for a voice translation device. In the bottom corner, a small logo, Midori Tech. Back in the Brooklyn apartment, Mr. Udo wrote in his personal journal, "Justice does not arrive with a bang. It arrives with a silence that forces people to listen to themselves." Then he closed the notebook, turned off the light. No more words needed. On the 10th day since the meeting that revealed Mr. Udo's identity, the atmosphere at the Manhattan branch of FutureSphere seemed to enter a new phase. No longer fear, but a quietness difficult to name, like the surface of a lake after a storm. There were no more shouts, no more arguments. No one mocked anyone anymore. Yet no one dared speak aloud about change either. It was as if everyone knew they were now living in a new chapter, but still didn't know how to begin the first sentence. Jordan, who once controlled the entire mood of the store with his voice and gaze, now arrived on time, wore the uniform, and completed basic technical tasks he used to delegate to others. No one told him to do this, but ever since his suspension, since being told he was not fired yet, but must prove his worth to be reconsidered, he had quietly begun to change. Not because anyone asked, but because no one laughed at his jokes anymore. Malik requested a 2-week leave. The official reason on paper was mental health concerns. But in truth, it was after his mother, a middle school teacher in the Bronx, asked him, "Have you ever looked down on students who couldn't pronounce English correctly?" that he broke down and cried for an entire evening. Darren requested a transfer to another branch, but internal bulletins showed that all employees tied to misconduct in the past 6 months were placed in a rehabilitation program, one requiring retraining not just in skills, but in attitude. Maya had been relocated to a small upstairs office within the store, a room once used only for storage. It was now called the Customer Experience Lab. The walls were lined with sticky notes, children's drawings, quotes from customer letters, and most prominently, a large printout of the first handwritten letter Mr. Udo had given her. Each morning, Maya stood and read the last line of that letter. "Don't let what makes you different be something you apologize for." One morning, Jordan knocked on the door. Maya looked up. He stood there holding a folder, eyes not meeting hers. I have a proposal to revise how we handle customer feedback. We used to just ignore it. I thought, maybe we could set up a proper form." Maya took the folder without speaking, but her eyes were no longer those of an intern dodging confrontation. They were the eyes of someone who had walked through hurt, understood it, and still chose to engage. She nodded. "All right, let me take a look." Jordan turned away. No apology, no excuses. But that was the sign of a real restart, through action. Meanwhile, at headquarters, Mr. Udo received a summary report. The number of positive feedback submissions at the Manhattan branch had increased by 19% in under 2 weeks. Staff-initiated support interactions had nearly doubled. No marketing campaign was needed, no new slogans. Just one thing: people had begun to listen to themselves. One particularly notable email sent to him came from an elderly customer. "For the first time, I felt like I could ask about technology without being treated as outdated. That girl named Maya made me want to learn again." Attached at the end was a selfie of the woman with Maya, taken on the very tablet she had once hesitated to ask for. Mr. Udo smiled as he looked at the photo, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and the real always has its own life force. That evening, Maya received a message. "I'll regain system access next week. Thank you for not kicking me while I was down." No name, but she knew who it was. The next morning, a small meeting was held at the store. No fancy chairs, no digital boards, just a small circle of staff. Maya stood in the center and spoke slowly. "I'm not good at being a leader. I don't want to manage anyone. But I believe that if a customer walks into this place, they should walk out feeling like they're still worth something. Even if they stutter, are old, or it's their first time using a phone." No one said anything, but the way they looked at her, it had changed. Jordan stepped out of the circle. He didn't leave. He walked to the tech counter and wiped the smudged instruction board clean. For the first time, he rewrote the guidelines, using bold, clear, easy-to-read lettering with full explanations, for new people to follow. No one praised him, but Maya saw, and she nodded. That night, Mr. Udo wrote a final entry in his small journal. "I used to think justice was when I won, and they lost. But really, justice is when no one has to pretend just to be treated with dignity." Then he turned off the light. No need for another chapter, because others had begun writing it themselves. On Monday, the 3rd week since Mr. Udo revealed his identity, amid the usual Monday chaos, for the first time, the Future Sphere Manhattan branch opened without needing anyone to be reminded to check equipment. Malik had returned after 2 weeks off. No more mockery, no more overconfidence. He walked into the store holding a small notebook. Inside it, a line scribbled, "I used to think I was good because I had the power to reject others. But maybe kindness is better, because it doesn't need to prove itself." Darren, who had requested a transfer, was ultimately asked to stay after submitting a 3-page reflection letter. One passage read, "I used to laugh when people mispronounce things. Now I realize maybe they were just speaking in their own way. Meanwhile, I had nothing meaningful to say." Maya met them at a morning team meeting. No praise, no trophies or banners. She simply said, "I don't need you to apologize to me. I just hope you remember how it felt when no one listened." Neither Malik nor Darren looked up, but one bowed his head out of fear, the other out of understanding, and Maya knew that was the difference that mattered. At the tech support counter, Jordan had returned to his shift. He no longer held a management role, no longer had approval power, but he performed better than anyone, taking detailed notes, offering thorough guidance, and not overlooking a single customer. Not even those who asked the same questions over and over. An elderly woman came in 3 times to fix her phone, each time forgetting her password. Jordan didn't sigh. He smiled softly and walked her through it again. Later, an older Vietnamese gentleman entered, not to shop, but to drop off a small bag of pastries and say, "Thank you for helping me update my software last time. Now I can call my grandson." Jordan nodded, feeling for the first time something he hadn't touched in 5 years of working there, the sense of being useful without needing to be seen. From her small office, Maya received the latest customer satisfaction report. For the first time in company history, the Manhattan branch surpassed the national average. But she didn't celebrate. She quietly printed the report, pinned it to the whiteboard, below a single line. "Not because we're good, but because, for the first time, we stopped to listen." That evening, Mr. Udo arrived at the store unannounced. No one recognized him right away. He wore a gray shirt, collar unbuttoned, and carried a paper bag containing several printed emails, messages from customers across the U.S., sharing how they'd once been mocked, rejected, or dismissed simply for not speaking proper American English. He handed the bag to Maya. "Keep this for me," he said. "Someday you might need it to protect someone. Not me, but someone who doesn't yet have a voice." Maya took it, nodding. But before he could leave, she asked, "Why didn't you punish them right from the start?" He answered slowly, "Because fear doesn't create change. It only creates hiding. But shame, if it learns to listen, can save someone." At Midori headquarters, the internal tech team logged into the employee system to launch a new feature, an anonymous feedback platform with response tracking, where the sender could see what actions their report led to. It was Maya's idea. She had proposed, "People who speak up need to know where their voice goes. If not, they'll stop speaking." The system was named Voice Loop. A week later, Maya was invited to speak at FutureSphere's National Customer Experience Conference. On stage, she didn't wear a suit. She didn't hold a wireless mic. She wore the same old uniform, the one she wore when she was just the nameless intern. And she said, "I'm not great at public speaking. I used to think I had to speak like everyone else. But now I know. You just have to speak the truth. And more importantly, stop to hear someone else's truth." The entire auditorium rose to applaud, not because the speech was polished, but because it was right. And sometimes simple truth is the only thing powerful enough to change an entire culture. The inauguration of FutureSphere's new flagship branch in Midtown East took place on a cloudy morning. There were no banners, no performing artists, no red carpet like in previous launches. Instead, a small group stood in a circle around a polished black stone courtyard. At its center stood a granite block, over a meter tall, draped in a thin white cloth, waiting to be unveiled. No one knew exactly what lay beneath. They had only heard vague mentions in internal newsletters. This event is not for media coverage. It is for the company and for what deserves to be remembered without cameras. Maya stood to the right of the circle, wearing a simple black uniform with no name tag. Beside her stood Jordan, for the first time attending an event not as a manager, but as a support staff member. His gaze was serious, not out of obligation, but because this time he wanted to witness, not pretend he already knew. The ceremony began with a short introduction by the regional development director. "We're not opening a store today. We're reopening a way of thinking." He then turned to Maya and signaled her forward. Maya didn't give a long speech. She simply said, "Someone once told me, Sometimes what changes an entire system isn't a protest, but a quiet act, done right. Then she pulled the white cloth down. Beneath it was a small statue, only waist-high to an adult, carved from a single block of black stone. It depicted an elderly man holding a laptop, his head tilted slightly forward, eyes gazing at someone, though it wasn't clear who. The face was left undefined, but the details, the rounded shoulders, the glasses gently resting on the bridge of his nose, a finger pointing toward the keyboard, made it immediately recognizable to anyone who had ever seen Mr. Udo. There was no plaque saying artist or who it depicts, just a single line carved into the base in both English and Japanese. If your tech can't respect people, it's not smart. And on the back, a second line. Don't place a device in someone's hand if you can't look them in the eye. The entire courtyard stood in silence. A silence not required. No one spoke. But no one left quickly either. After the ceremony, Jordan approached Maya. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer praise. He just said one sentence. At first, I thought this was too small to be a real issue. But maybe it's precisely because it was small that it lasted so long. Maya looked at him, then at the statue. Maybe it's the small things that make people feel they're allowed to look down on others. Jordan nodded. No more words. At other branches across the company, images of the statue quickly spread through internal bulletins. No one was instructed to repost it, but nearly every location chose to print and hang photos of the statue near their customer service counters. Some printed the second quote onto employee name badges. One branch in Texas even commissioned a mini replica of the statue for their front desk. No one asked, who approved this? No one needed permission, because this was no longer a directive. It was the quiet consensus of those who had once seen themselves in the wrong. At the Bronx branch, where Malik once attended high school, a pilot program was launched called Quiet Respect, inviting students to experience technology without time limits or restrictions on questions. Malik was the first to lead a session, when a 12-year-old brown-skinned boy asked, "Will I get kicked out if I ask too many questions?" Malik knelt to eye level and answered, "No, but I once kicked someone out of a store for thinking the same thing you just said." At headquarters, Mr. Udo received the internal bulletin from the flagship branch, along with a photo. Maya standing beside the statue, her hand resting gently on the stone, eyes not looking at the camera. He stared at the photo for a long time. He didn't print it. He didn't share it. Instead, he opened an old email folder, where he had once kept rejection letters he received as a young engineer, denied a scholarship because of his poor English. One email ended with a line, "You have to improve your communication if you want to be taken seriously." He forwarded that email to Maya, no message attached, just the subject line. They were wrong. 1 month after the statue was unveiled at Midtown East, a short video was sent to every FutureSphere branch across the country. No logo, no background music. It opened with the image of a pair of aged hands resting on an old laptop. The back of the hands wrinkled, a scratched silver ring on one finger. Then came a low, imperfect voice. It bore the tones of someone who had learned English late, but it was clear and steady. "I used to think I had to speak like everyone else to be respected, but it turns out the only thing I needed was someone patient enough to listen." It was Mr. Udo, recording his voice for the first time to share with the company, not for promotion, but as a quiet reminder of something he'd spent a lifetime learning. That value does not lie in pronunciation, but in sincere presence. The video ended with a single photo. Maya standing in front of a tech class for seniors, showing an elderly woman how to save photos to her phone. In the bottom corner, a line appeared. "Quiet leadership leaves loud echoes." The Manhattan branch was no longer the company's shameful chapter. It had become a pilot site for new initiatives. The voice loop feedback system was expanded nationwide. The Customers Shouldn't Have to Ask Twice campaign was launched. And most notably, Maya was invited to serve as a cultural service advisor for the entire Northeast region. She declined the title of executive director. Instead, she chose to keep her original name tag, Maya, Customer Experience. One Friday afternoon in her small office, she received a package. No sender listed. Inside was a vintage cassette player, 1990s style, and a single tape. When she played it, Mr. Yuto's voice echoed again, this time in Japanese. She didn't understand the language, but included was a short handwritten translation. If there comes a day when you feel like your patience is running out, remember what it felt like the first time someone trusted you before you finished your sentence. She cried, not out of sentimentality, but because she felt she had been entrusted with something greater than any title, a legacy. As for Jordan, he became an internal trainer for new branches. He no longer lectured with overconfidence. Instead, he began each training session by playing an old recording of himself mocking a customer. He hadn't deleted it. He kept it, as a reminder that shame that learns to listen was the best thing that had ever happened to him. In Tokyo, Mr. Yuto had stepped down from executive duties at Midori. He now served as an honorary advisor, living in a small apartment near the bookstore where he liked to read old tech magazines. Every week, he spent one day teaching English to elderly learners, people once too embarrassed to speak for fear of mispronouncing words. In his class, he never corrected their mistakes. He simply said, "Speaking slowly is one way to make people listen more carefully." On his final day as advisor, he sent a handwritten letter to FutureSphere. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific. The title read, "To those who once thought they weren't right enough to be heard." In the letter he wrote, "I didn't seek revenge. I didn't tear anyone down. I just showed up, so they would have to look at themselves. And the miracle is, some of them chose to change, not out of fear, but because they remembered who they had once been and who they now wanted to become." The letter was printed and quietly taped behind the tech room doors at every branch. No one was required to read it, but almost everyone had stood there silently at some point, as if part of an unspoken ritual. One late afternoon, Maya stood before the statue at Midtown East. Beside her was a girl around 10, wearing a school uniform. The girl asked, "Miss, who's that?" Maya replied, "Someone who used to be laughed at for speaking English wrong." The girl frowned. "Why'd they laugh?" Maya smiled. "Because they hadn't yet learned how to listen." The girl looked back up at the statue, then asked, "What about now?" Maya bent down, gently touching the stone. "Now people have learned, because he didn't walk away when he was met with silence. He stayed and faced it." Maybe you won't remember every word from this video, but if there's one thing we hope stays with you, it's this. A person's real worth isn't in how fluently they speak, but in how they treat the most overlooked person in the room. If you've ever been judged for how you speak, how you dress, or simply for staying quiet, this story is here to remind you, you're not alone. And kindness, if held long enough, always finds its way back. If today's story made you feel warmer, more loving, or even made you feel anger at the injustice shown, please give this video a like, hit subscribe to walk this journey with us, and share it with someone you believe needs to hear it today. We also want to hear your voice in exactly the way you want to say it. Drop a comment below. What moment in this video reminded you of yourself or someone who was once unfairly dismissed? Because sometimes a single story won't change the world overnight, but it might just change the way someone listens. And sometimes that's big enough to begin everything again.